Okay, we are live now.
Okay. You'll show if somebody joins you.
Yeah, right now it is showing the count is 2.
Okay.
So there are 2 people.
Do you want to wait for a minute or should we get going?
Well, up to you. I think it's fine.
Yeah. Maybe we'll just wait for a minute or so that maybe it'll
Sure.
give a couple of minutes for others to join and then we can jump.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've added your screen to stream. You're on mute.
Okay. Bharat is here. Hi Bharat. Good morning. I closed all the doors and windows. Hopefully um, it'll stop some of the noises, but otherwise honking and everything will be audible. It's okay, right? You are you hearing any background?
No, I don't hear any background.
Okay. All right, we'll jump in
Yeah, same here,
anyway.
Bharat. Good to see you. Sure, yeah, we can start.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, today's topic: building offline applications with Angular, and this is a scenario that I had some thought into for a few days. I think maybe Ravi remembers a couple of years back, right? Back when we were working in CDK, we were working with Service Worker. We were playing with it a little bit initially those days, but yeah, I mean, jumping into the topic, if we think about traditional web development, web application development a decade ago, network or connectivity is not really an issue. Uh, those days, pretty much primarily people use the web applications either on a desktop or maybe on a laptop connected to through a wire or maybe a stable Wi-Fi network. But these days, pretty much the scenario has completely changed. Most of the applications are used either on the mobile devices or on the tablets. Hardly there are any applications. Of course, there are lot of applications seen worked on in the desktop, but large set of users are using the mobile either apps or the web applications on mobile devices. With that, it opens up the challenge for the network. So network connection can't be taken for granted anymore, which means if a person is on the move, imagine a scenario, somebody has a large form to fill up. We get these emails where if you have to download an ebook, there's just an example scenario I'm taking. You would have 6 to 8 form fields. You would fill in your name, few details about the organization, email, whatnot. You type in the entire thing, let's say on a mobile device, either on a tablet or maybe on a mobile phone, and let's say you're on the move, in the sense you're either in a bus or something, and you lost the connectivity momentarily. After filling in entire data, you click submit or tap submit, and you lost connectivity. That ends up in a scenario where, let's say, the page redirects to a page can't be displayed kind of a message, which is, hey Pranav, good morning. Yeah, so it kind of adds to the bad user experience as well as frustration for the users. So these days, I think we would need the applications to handle these scenarios. We would want the form data to be either saved temporarily on the device. It can't. Users will not be happy about seeing a page can't be displayed in that scenario where when the connectivity comes back, if user either synchronizes, if the application automatically synchronizes the data with the backend, or at least pre-fills the form with the data that he or she has already filled in, might be a useful or a better user experience. That's one of the scenarios. But if we think about the other scenarios, a lot of applications, non-transactional. Let's think about the applications that are not banking, be it a social, any other, in that kind of a space where the content is largely given the importance. Imagine a Twitter app, for example. If somebody goes offline, you would still be able to, if you're still able to see the messages, you are even able to type in a reply or maybe add a new tweet, even though it is not synchronized with the services at that point, with the backend at that point, but your data is saved, as in when the user goes back online, it could be synchronized. Even a Twitter app or any other app for something similar to Twitter app could use cache data. Imagine somebody lost connectivity, but they're still able to interact with the messages that are already on the mobile device. Might be quite useful, and it's better experience compared to showing a page can't be displayed kind of a message. With that, that is the kind of web application that we're going to work on, building the offline applications with Angular. That is what I mean by offline applications. Provide access to let the application be functional even in an offline scenario. So let's jump in. This is a quick introduction about me. I've been a contributor to community for some time. Those are my social handles. I've been couple of years back, I think I contributed to NG Hyderabad with the and GDG Google Developers Group Hyderabad as well in speaking events. Otherwise, I've been consistently contributing with the blogs and various articles, etc. There's a quick introduction about myself and a few social handles specified there. Let me jump in. So this is the agenda for today's talk. We will begin with progressive web apps development. We will see initially working with an installable web application built with Angular. It's kind of a low-hanging fruit. If you're already working on an Angular application, it's quite easy to make it installable either on a desktop device or a mobile device. We will have a look at a quick demo and instructions to how to enable and create an installable web app. We'll also look at the service worker features in terms of caching the application, caching the data. We will look at those as well. Towards the end, we'll look at IndexedDB implementation. In the scenario I was talking about, there is one part of the scenario where as a user, I'm able to interact with the application even when I am offline. I see the application load. I see the messages. I see the messages on the app, which is the read functionality for the application, or the get calls might be functional behind the scenes. But on the other hand, I also mentioned about typing in a message and saving it temporarily and synchronizing it later, which is update, delete, create kind of actions. Even for those scenarios, how do we work with a web application? That's where IndexedDB comes into picture. Let's have a look at IndexedDB implementation as well towards the end. So this is a quick agenda slide. Moving on. Yeah, so as I said, the first topic this is a very easy, relatively an easy activity. Um, what I mean is, if you already have an Angular application, it is easy to make it installable on a device being a desktop or a mobile device. So let's take a simple example. I have a very basic Angular application up and running on my machine. Let me open it in a browser. Just in case if there is something cached. Yeah. So it's a pretty basic Angular application. It's a template. It just gives me an application skeleton, a toolbar, a couple of buttons, as well as some messages, a simple welcome message out there. So if I want to make this application installable, let's try that. I will go ahead and add an Angular schematic. I'll give it a minute for it to finish installing. Yeah, the schematic has been installed. The application was already running. So let me close this and restart. It rebuild the application now. If I come back and refresh it, let's go to the application tab in the network, in the Chrome developer tools. I was in network and moved to application tab. So there is a application manifest added now. It is providing a visual information about the application manifest. There are few icons, what is in the manifest, and there are few warnings and errors as well. Let's focus on the installability aspect of it. There is no matching service worker detected. In few minutes, we'll also look at what is service worker and few additional details about it. But for the moment, this is an error that we see that it is, even though we added the PWA schematic, it has created a service worker. It has created a manifest for us, but it is not installable yet because of this error. So what is happening here is, as of yet, Angular on ng-serve, which works on the Webpack, not yet supporting service worker, which is an issue in the GitHub that is already being worked on. So for the moment, we would have to go ahead and create a build. I can run build now. It should create a dist folder here. Yeah, this dist folder, and there are within dist sample one, that is the name of the application. So this is the production build that we have created here for the sample application. So let me go ahead and use a HTTP server, which will start for the sample application, it will start a web server instance. Let me run it on port 8081. We come back. Yeah, with a production build, and running on HTTP server instead of Webpack, we see the install button show up now. You see the install, it's sample one application, the install button shows up. One of the important errors that we have seen last time around about the installability is gone. I wanted to showcase this because, I mean, sometimes it could cause confusion. Somebody installed the PWA package, but they don't yet see the application installable immediately. So this is one of the factors. Little bit on code point of view, just wanted to showcase one small piece of code as well as code snippet here. So the service worker, which we will shortly discuss about, is enabled for production builds only at this point. I mean, you can change this. This is registration of the service worker with the Angular module. So one of the aspects being it is enabled only for production build. When we do ng serve, it is also a development build. But when we run ng build, of course, it's going to create a production build. So that's one of the aspects that helped us show the install button for us. Installability has been addressed because the service worker is enabled. We see the button here. So we were looking at manifest file here. There are few more warnings. We'll have a look at it. Let's look at the manifest file. In the Angular CLI folder structure under SRC, you should see the manifest, a new manifest file added. This is an auto-generated manifest file by the CLI. Yeah, the sample one, this is what we were seeing when we click on the install button. This comes from here. I can change this. Let me do one thing before I go ahead and update this manifest file. We'll go back to the module file I was showing you. Let me enable service worker all the time. You might have noticed there is a watch. So there is a watch script for watch script in the package.json, which will run the build in the watch mode, which means if there are any changes to the code base, it would rebuild the entire application, and I mean the dist folder will be updated with the changes. So it is doing it in the development configuration. It makes sense because you would want to watch for the code changes in the development process, not really if you're in a production build. So now that we have changed service worker, not only in production, we always enabled it. We come back and run the watch build. Yeah, the HTTP server is running, application is still up and running. So let's go back to the manifest file we were talking about. One of the aspects is the name of the application. Let me just call it Angular sample application. I'll give a short name. If I come back and hard reload, you should see these changes typically updated here. Short name is in few instances. This installability is not only applicable for the desktop devices, even on mobile platforms, especially Android and iOS devices, you would see the application name show up there. So a large name might be a problem on some of the mobile devices. So for those platforms, a short name will be used. Yeah, so that's one small detail about it. And let me also update the images. As of now, it shows the image Angular default icon. Go ahead and a few in the Hyderabad icons. Let me copy them over. the icon has been updated now. So we still see one error related to this, related to the icons here. The icons on each of the icon, there is one error which says any and maskable. A small detail about it. The purpose of the icon, there is one of the fields. First of all, the icons need to be of various sizes for various platforms, starting from 72.
ATP, yeah. Sorry for interruption. Can you increase the font size? Just zoom in
Sure.
the
Yeah.
VS Code. Yeah, people are saying they're not able to see.
Okay. On VS Code. Okay.
Yes, on VS Code. Yeah, this should be fine.
Is it better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I was talking about icons. Yeah, there are various icon sizes for various platforms. So starting from as small as 72 by 72 pixels to 512 by 512, the various sizes provided here. Few platforms crop the image either because they want to show the icon in a rounded icon. There will be an amount of icon image lost in cropping. So the purpose is for that purpose. If it is maskable, image is expected to have a little bit of padding. It's a minor detail, but might be useful in cases especially for branding. I mean, if you have an official app and it might, in a sample app it might not matter, but in a real app, um, if the platform rounds off the image and some content of the image is gone, it might not look good. So the maskable is an attribute to, if your image has padding which lets the platform crop it off, it is maskable. If not, any. So what we have configured here, the default configuration, is both maskable and any. It was supported earlier for service workers, but as it says, right, it is maskable, it is allowed to crop. At the same time, it is okay to use it as is, might not make sense. So the warning is about ensuring one of the two is always used. So for the moment, let's go ahead and get rid of maskable. We'll only keep one of them. It should, once the build finishes, yeah, it should get rid of even more errors and warnings. So there's one last error. I mean, the tool is pretty good. I mean, I really like the Chrome feature. I think it's a recent addition, if I'm not wrong. But this is quite a powerful tool. As you see, it actually even checks the image size. If I go to this particular 384 by 384 and open it in the it's only 284 pixel. It throws up that error. I wanted to fix this error and show the fixed error when I was creating the sample. I thought it is interesting. It's going to the level of detail where it's even verifying the size of the image and throwing up a warning. Quite powerful in that manner. Hey Ravi, am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, yes.
I got disconnected momentarily.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are back online. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. So we fixed the image size. We are all set now. In few steps, in few minutes, we have the application. We installed PWA package. It created a default manifest for us. We made few minor changes.
and the application is installable. Let me go ahead and click install. I can close the DevTools now. You have your application ready to go, installed on your device, be it a Mac or even a Windows machine for that matter. So you could directly launch it from the device, even on a mobile phone. You would see the icon on the desktop often. So you would just tap on the icon and you should be able to launch the app within its own window. It's not in a browser window, within its own window. That way, it gives you the native application experience. But end of the day, it's a web app running on a browser with some of the good features of the native apps. There's a get started demo. Let me go back to the application. Yeah. So let me throttle this to go offline, throttle the browser to go offline. Go to Google, we're not connected anymore on this browser. It should be loading from the service worker. Maybe the registration didn't complete. Let's try that again. Go to the application. Let me look at the service worker. See all registrations. I should see 8081 is registered. Ideally, if I go offline, it should still be loading the application. Okay, let me troubleshoot this and come back maybe towards the end of the session. I'll try to come back and show this demo one more time. But yeah, ideally, I would expect this app to run even when I'm offline, throttled offline. There must be something wrong happening here. Maybe some configuration error. We'll have a look. Okay, moving on. So assuming it worked, assuming it showed us the application even when we are offline, that is done by service worker. I mentioned service worker a couple of times during the initial introduction. Let's look at what is a service worker. Yeah. Go back to the slide deck. Yeah. Yeah, back to the slide deck, we'll talk about the service worker. What is a service worker? Service worker acts as a proxy between the network resource and the web page. So we can configure for the application few or all of the network resources to go through the service worker and perform few acts. Service worker is something running in the browser as a separate process or a separate thread. It is always running even when you don't have the application open. It's running in the background. So it can act as a proxy any request that is going from the browser to the internet will go through the service worker. That way you can perform an action. You can intercept the request and perform an action. It could be loading the web page. It could be caching the requests and responses. All those actions can be done by service worker. That's a high level introduction about service worker. Why do we care about the service worker? I mean, one of the important aspects is it decreases the dependency on the network. So as we were talking about the initial use case where you have an application, you went offline, you would want that application to at least provide minimal functionality, if not the complete functionality when you're connected. So those scenarios, service worker has the ability to cache the request for us, which means you would still be able to see the application load. You could show the messages, cached messages, user can still interact with them. So all those things can happen. If the application loaded, it gives us the ability to use the application to go to a IndexedDB implementation we're going to look at in a few minutes. Let's imagine there is a local database within the browser. So we would be able to perform synchronization activities, cache the requests and responses into the database. And as and when you go off online, you could perform those synchronizations. If the application itself doesn't load, you don't have the capability to do that. So that's the reason, a service worker point of view, it gives us that initial ability to load the application even when we are offline. And then there are other things that we mentioned about it acting as a proxy. It works with the fetch. I don't think service worker provides XHR. Fetch is the new API that lets us connect to the backend services over HTTP. So it works well. Service worker works well with fetch API. And it also, I mean, imagine when we traditionally, in the traditional web application, when you try to hit a web page, you go to the server, retrieve the scripts, get the data, show the application. Imagine there is an upgrade of the application. Let's say overnight we install a new version of the application. Next day, as users log in, they would automatically see the new version of the application. But as we introduce this concept of installing the application on client devices, we would need to ensure the latest application is installed as and when it is updated on the web server as well. Otherwise, few users might still be using the older version of the applications. So that scenario was not there in the original web application, but because we are adding this additional features, that becomes an important aspect to take care of. So service worker helps us here. It will do the installation either as a complete unit or it doesn't do the installation at all. Imagine there are few scripts that are not downloaded. So it will roll back the entire installation on that browser for that time. And that will let us not have scenarios where half of the new application and half of the old application is working in parallel and unknown behavior or bugs pop up. Those can be avoided because of this behavior. That's a quick point about why it's important to have the entire application, entire new version installable all the time. Ravi, I'm just going through the slides because I mean, I don't know if I didn't see any comments or anything. Stop me if you see any comment, anything that need to be addressed.
Yeah, sure, Kirti.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Bharat has posted a question. It might work if you manually turn. Okay, so he's actually giving you a tip. If you manually turn off the Wi-Fi or internet connection, maybe the offline mode that you were trying to demo earlier might work.
But then I will also lose the
You will lose
share.
us. We will lose you. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that worked.
Yeah, let's not risk that. Yeah.
This demo worked 99 times out of 100. That one time is in the demo.
Yes,
So,
it happens.
Yeah, not sure what happened.
Yeah.
I think it just didn't register it or something. We'll come back to it. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe demo codes are offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wait for them to be online.
Yeah. We'll give it a few minutes. Yeah. All right. So moving on, assuming there are no other questions or comments. Okay. Moving on. I briefly want to talk about service worker life cycle. So if we go to a web application that has service worker, it attempts to register the service worker. As I was talking about, the registration could have failed for the application we were trying for some reason. So as it tries to register, it attempts to install. The install can error out for some reason. If it did, the web application will still work when it is online. So only the offline features will be impacted, but as long as it's online, web application will still work. So assuming the installation went well, it will be activated. So then the proxy is active, which means the network requests for the application as well as the resources in terms of data or anything else are proxied through the service worker. We can take advantage of the cache. So the fetch part here, it either uses the cache based on the configuration, it might use the cache, or it might few data calls. As you can imagine, you don't want to cache them. You always want to get it from the service. For those things, you can always configure it to work from the backend, and the real-time data is always shown. So there is that distinction based on the configuration. Either you would use the cache or not. And let's say you haven't gone back to that application for really long, it's going to be terminated that way. The service worker in the background is not unnecessarily using the resources. So there is a quick look at the service workers. Service workers can also do a push notification. I'm not planning to discuss about the push notification in this talk, but it makes sense. Push notifications make sense because it is a process always running in the background, which means it can listen to the messages coming from the backend. So if we have the push notification implementation for a web app, we should be able to send the messages to the browsers on the desktop, on the mobile devices, where it will show up. I think most of the apps off late, if you go to, for example, Cricinfo or any other app, Times of India, you would go and it'll ask you to enable push notifications. As in when the new stories arrive, they can send the push notification even to the browsers. It's no more the case that you always have to depend on an app to receive the push notifications. But this life cycle is purely focusing on the caching aspect, not really the push notification part. Yeah. So service worker configuration. So let me show in the code what is the service worker configuration here. This is the default configuration for us. You have the schema and few index.html, few basic details. I want to focus on the asset groups. Asset groups are the static resources. This is pretty much where our entire app is cached by the service worker. So all the resources, icons, HTML, manifests, JS and CSS pretty much is our Angular application. Font, images, even the assets are all going to be cached. Based on this configuration, the caching happens with the help of the service worker. One aspect I wanted to talk about, the install is prefetch. So install mode can be prefetch or lazy. As the name suggests. So if you have 2 screens in your page or 10 screens in your page, a lazy would only cache the resource as and when you go to that page. And if it is a lazy loaded Angular application, only if you go to the route, you would get that resource. But prefetch will prefetch everything so that the entire application is available for you. So it's that configuration field here. We'll talk about data groups in a moment, but this is what we have in the application so far, in the sample application we have seen so far. Let me just take a moment if there are any questions, any comments.
Yeah, Kirti, can you check offline to true in the developer tools and try if it works?
Yeah, so give me just a second. So I have another sample application running here. So this is what I was planning to demo, even the IndexedDB and other aspects. So this app,
Okay.
this is pre-compiled. So let me go off. Yeah, I was already offline here. If I go MTV cache, yeah, it momentarily shows that message there, and then it loads the application back. At least that is the behavior in the desktop. I don't think the mobile devices do that. They launch the application pretty well. So yeah, so this app, even when we are offline, loads the app. It has a couple of pages. So primarily it's a sample app where we have list of board games, so to say, and there is a small button that shows a dice, and yeah, it gives you a random number every time you roll a dice. And then if you select a particular board game, it doesn't have any details. Yeah, this has few details. In the I just have mock responses in the backend. So it has the information about it, and users can add comments. That's the second screen. This seems this registration didn't have a problem, so it seems to work even when we are offline. Wanted to ensure we have the demo for that service worker. Just having a look at the comments section. Yeah, so I think we have looked at two configurations so far. One is the manifest, which lets the application be installable. I think we looked at few fields there, but other than that, we talked about name, short name. These are few other fields. Yeah, we were having the display as standalone. You could have full screen, minimal UI. You can even load it in the browser. It doesn't have to be hiding the browser all the time. Sometimes it's convenient for the web application to load in a browser with all those installable features, but it loads in a browser. So this is one more minor detail about the configuration. You want the entire application to be installed, a part of the application. That's what defines the scope for us. Start URL, I mean, these are related. What is the root for the application? And then the icons, we looked at the icons extensively. This is the original manifest for the installable application. Then we also looked at the service worker. We looked at the asset group, but I didn't talk about the data group yet. We could talk about it in a moment. Yeah, moving on. So WebArcade, this is the use case I was just talking about. I mean, I was taking this as an example, small little sample app built to demonstrate the service worker features. We have seen the 2 pages. I also have the capability to add comments even when we are offline. That is the idea. That's the reason this comments text fields are there. Yeah. So we looked at this. If we are offline, let me go to the service. This data is coming from the service worker. Just wanted to highlight this. It shows that this is not really, I mean, as a developer, it's not something users does. We can have a look where the data is coming from. So let's look at the data configuration as well. So yeah, let me jump into the data part. Let me go to the other application now. There's a service worker configuration here. So this is a small minimalistic sample. It's caching anything that starts with API. So pretty much it has two calls, both the calls are cached. This is probably, there is a good detail here. There are few attributes in terms of what is the age. I mean, if you're caching the data, how long you want to keep, I mean, if you keep that data indefinitely, that's not a good thing either, which means we need to have the data cache timed out at some point. The max age specifies that for us. I'll come back to timeout in a moment, but amount of data that you want to store, number of bytes you want to store on your browser, that is one more detail. Indefinitely, if you keep storing large amounts of data in the browser, that's not a good idea either. So max size provides what is the most amount of data you want to cache for your application. That's another configuration you can keep. So as I said, the Chrome DevTools is quite powerful. It gives us the information in the application tab. So we were looking at manifest. Now let's look at the service worker as well. Some of this information will also be here. Service worker related configuration and the you could see we were looking at the install, activated, the lifecycle functions, all that information, timeline, how long it took to activate, and those details are here. Yeah, if I click network resources, it gives me even more detailed by file. Yeah, this is a good tool to play with. Yeah, back to the configuration. Wanted to talk about the strategy for caching. This is the slide I was in. So the strategy could be either freshness or performance. What is the performance strategy? So imagine you want the application to load fast all the time. So it would get the data from the cache so that it loads the application first. But if the cache is unavailable, maybe because you cleaned up the browser or this is the first time you access the application, then it goes to the network and obtains the resource. That is the performance. And the freshness on the other side always goes to the network first. If network is not available, then it comes to the cache and gets it from, I mean, this is the scenario we originally talked about. If the network is not available, we still have the application usable because of the cache. So that is the freshness aspect. So, so timeout tells us how long does it wait for the network resource to respond to us. If it doesn't, in this case, if it doesn't respond for 10 seconds, it would load from the cache. If you have freshness as if you have performance as the configuration, then the max age plays even more important role because it's always getting it from the cache. If you expect every 36 hours new data shows up, new messages show up in your backend, it's a good way to keep that where performance is the strategy. It always loads from the cache. 36 hours it keeps the cache. After that, it refreshes, goes to the network and obtains the latest data. This is, yeah, if you want I think somebody was asking for link to if you want to in parallel look at it, let me share it here. I don't know, I don't think I can comment in the group, I think, Ravi. Let me put it in the private chat. Can you share it to the larger group?
Sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, so far we enable the application to be installable, which means you could install it on a device. A web app is installable on a device. And then as the next part, we have been able to cache the application as well as the data. We are only reading the, we are making GET calls, and the read service calls, that data is what is cached and shown when the application is offline so far. That's what we have done so far. And the application is installed with the help of the service worker. It cached the scripts for us, it cached the data for us. So can we manually check for updates? Of course, we want to check for the updates every time you load the app. So these are a couple of APIs that make a lot of sense for us to verify every time there is a version update. This gives us a promise. I can show this code. It was available. This is called available till version 12. Version 13 changed it to version updates. My code sample is in version 12, so it will show it as available there. I'll show that piece of code. So in the sample app, if you look at the deck, there is a link to the GitHub repo for the sample app as well. You could play with this code as well. You see everything related to service worker is encapsulated into this particular class, SW communication services, communication service. So one of the, I think I would upgrade this to version 13 and change this to version updates. But version 12 point of view, it is available service call. If a new version of the service worker is available, this observable success will be invoked. It will show a message. It will show a snack bar message that a new version of the application is available. And if user chooses to, some users might be in the middle of something, they don't want to immediately reload and reinstall the new application. If user chooses to reinstall the newer version of the update, overnight you did an install and users wants to get the latest version, you could do that. User chooses yes, then you would reload the app to get the latest version of the app. Yeah, that is the check for update. If the check for update returns true, which means new version is available and it is downloaded, ready to go, ready to install, then we can do it with version upgrade, which I think it became a promise in version 13, but available is unobservable. This is manually doing it, but so even if we don't write this code, service worker will do it for us automatically. First time you load the app after the new version is available, it will go identify, it will not install it. Next time you reload the application, it will automatically update the newer version. Service worker always keep the web app latest and greatest. It will not let users for a long time use the older version of the app. It needs 2 refreshes because for service worker to identify, it needs to, there is 1 load. If it instantly updates it, user might be in the middle of something, the data might be lost. So it makes sense for the service worker to install the app next time user refreshes the application. Assuming there are, going back to the life cycle, assuming there are no errors, it will be activated immediately. Second time, second load. Yeah, so initially, I'm switching topic now. Initially, I showed the module configuration. So there is a service worker script file that Angular creates for us with the schematic that we have seen, Angular PWA. So this is registered along with the module as application is bootstrapping. The module loads would register it for us. I can show it in the code as well. Yeah. So typically you would want the service worker registered for production builds. So as I mentioned, for the moment, it is not available for the serve. I think default configuration serves still use as Webpack. It's not available for that. You would have to do a production build. You can change it to development build if you're doing a build watch. But yeah, that is this flag. And then it will register the service worker when the application is stable or after 30 seconds. And the comment also says the same. So that is this piece of code. One more detail I just want to add for service worker. If it is not localhost, if you're deploying your application somewhere on the domain, on the network, it needs to be HTTPS. If it is HTTP, service worker won't work again. Like the first time localhost 4200, the way we saw it. So it will show an error in the application manifest and it will not show us it will not cache the resource. Yeah, this is I will give a sec for people to read through this. Yeah, these are the resources we could look at. Can I use .com? I think most of the HTML5 features is a quite useful resource. Service worker ready. This is somebody's Git repo, which is pretty good resource for us to have a look if a particular version of the browser that you care about is in the list or not for service worker. We'll take a moment for any comments, questions. Ravi, do you see anything pop up in the comments or should I continue?
Yeah, so somebody is asking, Anil is asking, are you storing data in cache? How do we manage security?
So actually, we manually writing the code to store it. We will see that momentarily in IndexedDB. But service worker, all these resources, that's the reason it is enforcing HTTPS is used. The tunnel connection between the browser and the remote domain, remote web server on the domain is secure and nobody can, even if they tap into the data and read it, it'll be because of HTTPS, right? It'll be junk. They will not really be able to make out anything of it. So there are no security issues I'm aware of. I mean, with cookies and few other caching, you could take the user session and read the data, right? That kind of scenarios, I don't think there is any problem with HTTPS. This is very carefully designed API. Google initially started supporting it with Chrome, and eventually all the browsers started supporting, including the iOS and Safari started supporting this. A large number of applications using it today. Just for a test, right? What you could do is, if I come back to this, I go to let me go to application. Try to show something here. See all registrations. Open here on the other screen. So other than few things that I am working on, if you look at Angular.io, Google Calendar, many other web applications use Service Worker today. You can check your browser history, whatever sites you have gone to. If the Service Worker is enabled, there are pretty popular sites which are secure applications. They're using the Service Worker. I hope I'm answering that question. If there is a follow-up, let me know. If you want to go to it, either type in Chrome service worker internal, service worker hyphen internals, or come to application and see service workers here, click on see all registrations. All right, let me jump back the slide deck. Yeah, so far, if we go the last 1 hour, what we have seen, we started with a web app, we made it installable, we installed the web application. We had seen a sample where the application is cached, it's accessible. The WebArcade app, the sample app we had, is accessible even when it was offline. You could go through, the application is usable even if it is not getting the latest data from the backend because you're offline. It is primarily caching the get resources, but a lot of our applications would have obviously post, put, delete, patch, various other HTTP calls, which are creating, updating the data for us. What about those functionalities? Obviously, if you're working on a banking system, you have to be careful about which use case you would apply this technology. But let's consider, for our discussion sake, some messaging system, like you're adding a comment, like something like a social application, like a Twitter, you're adding a tweet. So such applications, it suits best. You can even create data when you're offline. So service worker at this point, I believe eventually these features will be added to service worker apps as well. But at this point, if you look at the cookbook, a lot of developer community people have put together, you would see that either IndexedDB or a similar implementation has been used. IndexedDB is popular in that space where you could create your resource. I mean, the resource could be, in our example, it is a comment. If I go to this, if I add a comment, even when your application is offline, I'll be able to add comment. When I was just testing this app, this comment was added when I was offline. So you could do that with this implementation. Let's go through the scenario in detail. So what is IndexedDB? IndexedDB is a key value pair database running on your browser. So once again, back to the Chrome DevTools. So there are various storage options. We would have largely worked on, most of us would have worked on local storage, session storage, cookies. IndexedDB is one of them. So it gives us a unstructured key value pair. You could store JSON, larger amounts of data compared to a simple cookie or anything similar to that. It is a database in the browser. It is something running on the client side. As the name suggests, you could create indexes on your resources. You would be able to retrieve the resources faster, search for a query for a particular row or a document that you want to retrieve within a browser. So that at high level, what an IndexedDB is all about. Yeah, how do we work with IndexedDB? IndexedDB in Angular, and this talk is pretty much focused on Angular. This is a browser API. I mean, irrespective of the framework, this API works, but I'm talking about the same thing in the context of Angular framework. So as you bootstrap an Angular module, well, I'll show the code as well. You should be able to create either create the IndexedDB instance and open a connection to it, or if you have come back as a returning user, if user has come back and if the database already is open, database already is created, then you would just open a connection to it. Then object store. Then next you create a reference to the object store. I mean, just as a mental model, I would compare this to, let's say, something like Mongo, where you have an object store which is similar to a collection there, or it is similar to a table in an RDBMS. It's a collection of documents for us. You would begin a transaction. Transaction can be read-only transaction if you're performing read actions. If it could be a read-write transaction. So transaction, it provides, as we said, it is a database. So it provides the transaction capability all in the browser. So you'll be able to create let's say, create, update, delete, group them together, call it a transaction, asset property supply, which is atomic, which means you would be able to either perform all 3 steps, or you would roll back everything if there is a failure, and none of that will be performed. That way the consistency of the database is maintained. So quick introduction about IndexedDB. Yeah, so I have, let me just show the code first to how to begin with IndexedDB. Once again, if you clone this code repo, you would have the link in the deck as well. We'll also share it separately, but you would see everything related to IndexedDB in the IDB storage access service, which is in the common folder under the app. So if I go to the module, so the IDB storage service is initialized as the app module is initialized. This is the app module. With the app initializer, you would have this init function called as the application is bootstrapping. So the IndexedDB API are asynchronous, which means you would make a call and you would provide a callback. None of it happens at that time. It would come back with the response in the callback. So you would say .open, and on the request object, if it is successful, you would perform an action. If it has an error, you would perform an action. Once again, it's an IndexedDB. So you have a database, there are objects created, you would have a structure, a logical structure for your database, and the documents and the collections, the object store. Collection is nothing but the object store. You would add that, and because it's something running in the browser, if the new version of your application is changing the schema for us, on upgrade needed is invoked every time you launch this init function, or you call this init function when you launch the app. So this will give you an opportunity to perform upgrades to your database. So you could probably recreate few object stores. If you change the schema for them, you could delete them and recreate them, whatnot. Those actions can be performed here on the on upgrade needed. But primarily what we are focusing in a simple code sample here is that you're opening a connection, calling the database WebArcade. That's what you've seen in the browser here, WebArcade. And on success, this particular line of code will be executed. You have a reference to the IndexedDB. That's pretty much what it's doing for us. So if I use the IndexedDB reference, so in the on upgrade needed, this is a good place to create the object stores for us, because even the first time this is invoked, even if you're performing an upgrade to the database, this is invoked. You can delete if there is any changes to be done to the object stores, create the object store. That's what we're doing. We also create an index in this case. This is just a sample. We are creating an index on a column or a field in the JSON. We are creating a JSON. We are storing a JSON object here. So comment ID, we are creating an index. If you're querying by comment ID, a lot of time it makes sense to create an index for it. Hope this makes sense. Yeah, so let me give a quick demo. I will go offline. So I just created a visual here where the moment it goes offline, it turns the title gray. It's kind of a visual indicator to the user. So browser supports these events, online, offline events. You can perform actions when the browser goes online or offline. I mean, traditional approach is probably, I mean, we would have written code to either hit maybe a time service or something like Google to see if you're still connected, which will error out, which means you're not connected. But this is a out of box flag available. The event is available even on the window.location service. Window.location object, you should see is online. There is a field. You would be able to take advantage of that as well. So I can create a new comment. Just test. So it gives a message when offline, it'll check the status of the offline. If it is offline, we saved it temporarily. You're not going to lose this data. If I come back to the application, if I refresh the database, you should see this object stored in the IndexedDB. If I go back off online, yeah, it cached the comments. The cached comments are synchronized. It showed the message for us. The test comment is added now. If I refresh this, you see the test comment is added now. It went back even in the, maybe I should do this one more time. I'll go offline. It is synchronized. It is saved in the local IndexedDB. I will show you here. Once I refresh the database, test2 is now here. I'll go back online, no throttling. You should see the post call happening to the backend for the comments API, which means you'll see test2 here. If I refresh it, I'll still get this test2. I also clean up the local database. If I refresh the database here, you'll not see that entry anymore. You could have a look at the code sample. I'll show you a few of those code statements here, few of some of that logic here, but you can explore more in the sample as well. So add comment. How did we add a comment to the IndexedDB? We have the IndexedDB reference available for us once we open the connection in the init function that we have seen. You create a transaction on the object store and then add the document. Similarly, you could, when you synchronized it with the backend, you would once again delete this. Create a transaction, read write transaction on the object store, delete based on the record ID. If it is successful, we'll just do a console log. Should understand it. Cleared those, should see some of this console log information available here. I think we refreshed it already. But yeah. Yeah, so get all cached comments. If I show this, when the online event is triggered, we will get all the cached comments, perform a bulk create on the backend. It'll create it'll use the HTTP service, HTTP client service, and make a post call to the backend. Yeah, so IndexedDB, if you spend some time on this service, one of the aspects you would understand here is, compared to, let's say, local storage, session storage, you would see this API a little bit complicated because it's not a simple create and update, create or delete a cookie, or create or delete a key value pair in local storage or session storage. It's like a database. Transactions are there. So the API need to provide all those features. It is a little bit complex. So there are few alternatives that abstract all that logic for us, that does some of these things behind the scenes for us. I listed some of them. In the code sample, you will see Dexy JS API related example as well. You would see a similar service that will do the same thing. Here the code will be a lot simpler because this API is abstracting a lot of details for us. Yeah, this is the file once you start exploring the code base, Dexy Storage Access Service. Even in the, I have created a separate database that just the sample application logic. You can manage it however you want once you start implementing this in your own web pages. Yeah, this is a separate database that does the same thing with Dexy. Dexy is one of the popular libraries. A lot of, I've seen few implementations with Dexy. It simplifies the IndexedDB implementation. It makes it similar, somewhat closer to local storage, session storage, key value pair access. On the other hand, local forage, this thing provides us the polyfills to fall back to WebSQL and local storage if your browser doesn't support IndexedDB. There's one more alternative. There are a few more. DjangoDB, JSStore, SQL. JSStore gives the SQL similar API. Somebody comfortable with SQL, JSStore is a good one to use. CouchDB as well, which is an offline data with CouchDB. It does the behind the scenes synchronization with the CouchDB. If you're keen on using CouchDB, or if your application already uses it, this is a good choice to have a look at. I'll hold on for a minute to see if there are any comments or anything so far. Moving on, yeah, browser support. Yeah, so these are caniuse.com. It gives us pretty much every HTML5 feature. It gives the browser support related data. Most browsers are, as you see, there is a lot of green. IndexedDB supported by most of the client browsers. Deno eventually will add to it. I'm confident about that. I don't know if it makes sense for Deno to do that because it's more a browser client level API. Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about a few scenarios here. We started with making the web application installable all the way to even creating the data offline and synchronizing it when we go offline, when we go online. But these are the capabilities. These are some of the features the modern web applications can take advantage of. But however, some things we have to keep in mind. These are not suitable for highly transactional systems, banking applications. These are more, I'm sure it wouldn't make sense. Somebody is transferring money to do that offline. So So we have to be careful where we implement these features. That's one aspect. Be aware of browser support. I mean, if, for example, somebody is still depending on Internet Explorer, haven't moved to Edge, even in the Microsoft ecosystem, and they should be aware a lot of these features are not available there. Yeah, there are few features on iOS devices and Mac machines, not even iOS devices. I think that is only applicable on Mac machine related to the online event. You might have to fall back to checking the online status in the traditional way, hitting a time service or maybe google.com to see if you're connected. Yeah, I think I will add an issue. I've seen an issue related to that. I will add that information in here in the comments. Yeah, it's I mean, I've seen that happen to me once, but it's an edge case. That's pretty much what I have for today. So if there are, I'm open for discussion. If there are any comments, questions we want to chat about, we can certainly do that.
I don't see any questions other than there is an ask for the link of the sample code.
Yeah, so I think that is already in this slide deck, but I think.
Okay.
Let me check. Yeah, this thing. But I'll ping this also in the chat so that they don't have to come to this slide and take it. I'll ping you. I don't think I have access. I have to be logged in,
Sure.
I guess.
Sure. I got it.
Yeah. We'll wait for a minute to see if there are any other questions, comments. If not, we can wrap up, I think. Or even chat about it in general, I guess. Community event.
Yeah.
All right, Ravi. I think not much at this point, so good to wrap up, I guess.
Okay. Sure.
All right. Thanks, Ravi. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Kirti. Yeah. Thank you guys for joining today. Yeah. So we'll schedule the next meetup whenever it is possible. Yeah. See you all again. Bye.
Bye, all. Good weekend.
Yeah. Same to you.